Hello everyone, welcome to International Marketing 452. This is chapter 2, right? In this chapter, let's talk about the global economy, okay? Let's look at the global economy. Yeah. If you have traveled globally or in other countries, you'll notice that there are many different things, situations, phenomena in all across the globe with unique economical situations with each country. Let's talk about that. Right. In this chapter, we're going to describe the international trade, theories of trade, international agencies, and economic integration. We're going to explain the importance of global trade to global economy. Okay. And international trade overview. Right? Basically, we'll talk about the basic theories of world trade. Right? What is the balance payment? You need to know that what is balance payment. This is going to be in your test. Okay? And the exchange rate. International agencies for promoting economic and monetary stabilities and protectionism and trade restrictions, economic integration as a means of promoting trade, and globalization controversy. I'm sure you have heard about the globalization. There are controversies. There are people with different opinions talking about that. Okay, let's look at the global economy. Yeah, let's imagine a scenario. Somebody got up in the morning, right? The person may say, "I started the day early, having set my alarm clock, which is made in Japan, for 6 a.m. While my coffee pot, which is made in China, was perking coffee. The coffee was made in Costa Rica. I shaved my electric razor, made in Hong Kong. I put on a dress shirt, which is made in Sri Lanka, and designer jeans, made in Singapore, and tennis shoes, made in Korea. After cooking my breakfast in my new electric skillet, which is made in India, I sat down with my calculator, which is made in Mexico, and to see how much I could spend today. And then after setting my watch, which is made in Taiwan, to the radio, made in India, I got in my car, made in Japan, and continued my search for a good paying American job. Right? At the end of yet another discouraging and fruitless day, I decided to relax for a while. I put on my sandals, which is made in Brazil, poured myself a glass of wine, which is made in France, and turned on my TV, which is made in Indonesia, and then wondered why I can't find a good paying job in America. I'm sure you guys will find a good job, right? Our job market is pretty good nowadays. So that's just how internationally intertwined we are with the products from many parts of the world. Okay. This table shows the foreign sales of major multinational corporations. You look at companies like ExxonMobil and Walmart, Royal Dutch Shell, BP, Chevron, Conoco, Phillips, Total, SA. You probably haven't heard about them. That's a European company. Toyota, you heard about that. ING Group, General Electric, you're familiar with. Volkswagen, PetroChina, AXA, NEI, Ford Motor, and Daimler, right? This is just the look at their percentage of the total sales. Foreign sales as a percentage of the total sales. For ExxonMobil, it's like 75%, right? And the other companies are like as high as 85% for this French company, to as low as PetroChina, only 5%, right? But these are all the international sales in millions of dollars are all huge, and their net sales are also huge. You can see major multinational corporations or MNCs, they have a huge percentage, a portion of their sales from other countries. Okay, they just have to go global. Okay? This chart. This may be a little outdated. We'll just give you an idea here, right? But top trading partners of the United States. Right? If you look at the U.S. exports, exports of goods, right? The top countries like Canada, Mexico, and China, China, maybe the second or first, is changing now. Okay, you can look at the percentage of total exports. Okay, the largest export market for the U.S. Still is Canada, Mexico, China, Japan, and Germany. Okay, and then if you look at the imports, where do we import our stuff, our goods? Right, from Canada, Mexico, Japan, Germany. You can see that we trade a lot with those major trade partners. And those countries, the countries in the list, the top 10 list, are all major industrial countries, that have huge output that are satisfying the needs of global market. Okay? If you look at the top 10 exporters and importers in worldwide merchandise trade, this number is also could be a little bit outdated. Okay, and China is probably number one now. Okay, for exporters, Germany, China, U.S., Japan, France, Italy, etc. Okay? You can look at their total value in billions of dollars, export dependence, okay? And also their value per capita, per person. Okay, you can see it's huge for Germany and for Netherlands and Belgium. All your small European countries they're really big on exporting. Okay, the worldwide rank of importers, U.S. is number one. We import a lot, right? Uh, Billions, thousands of billions, trillions of billions of dollars, thousands of trillions of dollars, thousands of billions of dollars. That's trillions of dollars. Okay? Our import dependence is not that high for U.S., but for other countries, Germany, China, and France, and it's pretty big, right? And for Netherlands, it's really big, really high. Okay? And you can look at also the value per capita ranges from as low as $800 per person to like $36,000 per Belgium per person for Belgium. Okay? Different countries have different dependence, on import and export, and also the value per capita also reflects the degree of their economic development. Okay? If you look at the trade top 20 nations ranked by GDP, this number is also not outdated, but to give you an idea, right? China is probably China surpasses Japan and second, and this also the GDP number. This one's outdated too, because this book was older. Yeah, the U.S. GDP is now 14 trillion and more. Ask yourself, test yourself. Do you know how much we produce every year as a national GDP? Excuse me. Do you have an idea? It's actually about the 14 trillion, but 23 trillion nowadays. Okay. So also, if you look at the historical developments of worldwide global economy, you see a lot of excuse me, a lot of things that happen, and because of economic situations. Right? You probably heard about the stock market crash of 1929. Okay? Beginning with that, the United States started this isolationism and more protectionism. Right? Start to restrict imports from other countries, and then the other countries retaliated with similar measures. If you do not allow my product go to yours, I'm not going to allow your product come to my country. So then that led to a great global depression, and Germany and Japan actually were hit particularly hard, and that led to World War II. Okay? What do you think about today? Okay, this is an open question. It's just for discussion. We have seen a certain type of a globalization, also some type of a protectionism. Okay? And are we in World War III now or not? You may have different opinions, people have different arguments, but we do see there are at least two wars going on in the world right now: Ukraine, Russian war, and Arab-Israeli war. Okay? Will there be others? Yeah, some worried about it. I'm worried about it. Yeah, we'll see. Okay? There are some basic theories of world trade. Why do trade take place between countries? Why do trade takes place between countries? Right. One theory, the theory is about the absolute advantage, and trade is based on each country selling what it is best at producing. If your country is really good at producing something, then other countries will want to have it, buy it, then there is trade going on. It's absolute advantage, right? Other theories argue that trade can occur between two countries, even it's called comparative advantage, right? Not absolute advantage, that you may not be the really best, very best in producing something, but if you have a comparative advantage, you can still trade. That trade can occur between two countries, even if one of the countries has no absolute advantage in any product. Okay? Think about that. Okay? Even if you don't have absolute advantage, you can still have trade. Okay, so that's the two theories here. Let me give an example here about absolute versus comparative advantage. It has something to do with the worker productivity. And we know that in developed countries, worker productivity is very high, right? Let's take example of two countries, Vietnam and Germany. Vietnam and Germany, right? If you look at, let's take first example. If you take a yearly output per worker, if the Vietnamese or German want to make machineries, the Vietnamese may produce like 400 machines a year, and German worker is probably are more productive. They make 500 a year. Okay? If you look at tomatoes, how much tomatoes they can grow, Vietnam can probably produce like 1,600 tons of tomato, whereas Germany can produce only 500 tons of tomato. Okay? And then who has the advantage? Right? Obviously, you can see that the Vietnamese workers has this advantage in producing tomatoes because he or she is more productive, right? 1,600 compared with 500 for Germany. The German worker, on the other hand, has an advantage in producing machines because he or she can produce 500 machines versus only 400 for Vietnamese. Right? That's one. In this case, there is absolute, absolutely, there's absolute advantage, right, for either country. Okay? But look at what about another situation? Let's give another example. Also look at the yearly output per worker. Let's say the machinery, the Vietnamese can produce not 400, but only 200 machines. Right? The Germans still makes 500 machines. And the tomatoes, maybe the Vietnamese can only produce 800 tons of tomatoes, but Germany with machineries, agricultural machines, they can produce 1,000 tons of tomato. Right? In this case, the German side has an advantage in both machines, right, 500 to 200, and tomatoes, 1,000 to 800 tons tomatoes. Right? This would mean that that would suggest that the Vietnam has no way of no advantage in trading or selling their product, as the German workers are better, in both, right, machine and exports, right, and machine and tomatoes, right. But we have to look at the opportunity cost production, because you probably can, either focus on producing machines or on producing tomatoes. Okay? So if you look at the opportunity cost of production, because you can make either one of the two, right? For Vietnamese workers, what's his cost of making machines? You know, for 200 tons, 200 machines, he either makes 200 machines or 800 tons of tomato, right? So one machine would cost 4 tons of tomato. Can you see that, right? 200 machine, 800 tomatoes, right? 800 divided by 200, you get 4. So for each machine, right, the Vietnamese worker does not make, he could make 4 tons of tomato, produce 4 tons of tomato. Or conversely, if the Vietnamese worker is to produce produce 1 ton of tomato, the cost for him to do that will be now to make a machine, right? And how much machine? That's a quarter machine, right? Remember, there's 1:4 ratio here, right? So in this case, the absolute advantage, okay, we're gonna look at that in a second, right? Now let's look at the German worker, right? German worker can either produce 500 machines or 1,000 tons of tomato, right? For this German worker, his opportunity cost of one machine is what? 1,000 divided by that 500. One machine will cost 2 tons of tomato. Okay? You either make one machine or 2 tons of tomato. You can do both, of course, right? So, or 1 ton of tomato conversely costs the German worker 50.5, half of machine. Okay? So again, looking at absolute advantage. Remember, see the German worker 500 over 200, 1,000 ton over 800 ton. The German worker has an advantage in definitely in tomatoes, right? And also in machines, right? And the Vietnamese worker has none. Right? Either way, they're not producing as much as Germans. So Vietnam has no absolute advantage in this case. But if we look at opportunity cost for the Vietnamese, 1 ton of tomato only costs half a machine. But the opportunity cost for German worker is 1 ton tomato costs half a machine. So who has the advantage in producing tomatoes? The Vietnamese, because it costs him less, right? So he has a comparative advantage in producing tomatoes. And what about the German worker, right? The German worker, for his production of machine, each machine costs 2 tons of tomato, whereas that costs the Vietnamese worker 4 tons of tomato. So the German worker has an advantage in producing machinery because it costs him less. Okay, so that's the theory of the international trade. You look at absolute advantage, Vietnamese has none, German has both. But in reality, if you look at opportunity cost, German has that advantage as machinery, and then Vietnamese in tomato. So that's the idea. Okay. So let's move on. Okay. So as I said, for Germany, 1 ton tomatoes, half a machine. 1 machine, 2 ton tomato. Right. Vietnamese, right. 1 machine, 4 ton tomato. 1 ton tomato have 0.2 machines, as we just said, right? So if we trade at this ratio, for example, right? Yeah, at this ratio, right? Anywhere between for the Vietnamese, for example, right? 1 machine costs them like 4 tons of tomato, right? And for Germany, it's 2 tons tomato. If they trade, the Germany and Vietnam trade between 1 machine costing 3 tons of tomato, between 2 and 4. Think about that. Right? If it is, let's say the price is of the machine is 3 tons of tomato. Right? In that case, German workers will benefit, and also Vietnamese will benefit as well. So it's a mutually benefiting advantageous trading ratios. Okay? I want you to read the textbook, think through this part of the chapter, so make sure you should fully understand that. Okay. Professor Michael Porter, you probably heard about him. And he was professor of economics. Right? He argued that the theory of comparative advantage is limited by its focus on elements of production. Okay? What are the elements of production? Land, labor, natural resource, and capital. Right? And that gives you the competitive advantage. We can see some countries have advantage in the element of land. Some has a cheaper labor, right? Some has more resources. Some has like more capital. Okay? That's one theory. So in this theory of competitive advantage, elements of production is key, right? Also the nature of domestic demand is also having an impact. Is there enough domestic demand for the product? Right? Also, the presence of appropriate suppliers or related industries is also important. Are there enough suppliers of all the raw materials or components? Right? Also, conditions. Or one other. So another, that's the presence of suppliers, right, or related industries. Yeah. Also, the conditions in the country. Sorry about that. So that govern how companies are created, organized, and managed. Also that also has an impact. Right? And the nature of domestic rivalry has impact as well. There's a high competition within the country. The country will turn out to be overall very good at producing something. Okay? We know that in this country, America, virtually in every industry, there is a huge competition among different companies. Okay? Exchange rate. Now let's talk about exchange rate. What is exchange rate? Exchange rate really is just if you go, you're an American citizen, you go to Europe, right? You go to Europe, and then you find that you need to change your money, our money, dollars to euros, right? At a certain exchange rate, right? The rate, right? You may exchange your money at the airport in the U.S., or you go to the airport in Italy or Germany, you can change that as well, right? So what does the exchange rate mean? It measures. An exchange rate measures the value of one currency in terms of another currency. That's exchange rate. And let's say the U.S. dollar is worth half pound, British pound, right? That's the exchange rate, right? And or one British pound will equal to what? $2. Okay. And one currency can appreciate or depreciate against another. We will see that if you look at the foreign exchange market, you see the changes in exchange rate. It changes, virtually, every day and every hour, every minute. It changes, fluctuates all the time, right? If U.S., let's say starting point is U.S. dollar is worth like half pound, right? Now if it changes to U.S. dollar, $1 is worth 0.75 pounds, 0.75 pounds. In this case, the U.S. dollar is worth more, right? More than 0.5. So we're saying the U.S. dollar is appreciating. Instead, if U.S. dollar is now worth 0.3 pound, not 0.5, but 0.3 pound, we say that the dollar is depreciating, okay, depreciating, okay? And also there's a term in the national trade, there's a term called the balance of payments. What is a balance payment? That is going to be your test also, okay? A balance payment is an accounting record of the transactions between the residents of one country and the residents of the rest of the world over a given period of time. Okay? There's accounting record of transactions between the residents of this country, one country, and the residents of the rest of the world. That's called balance payments. Okay? So because of international trade, money flows, right? Money either flows out of the country or flows into the country, right? Let's look at the situations, right? In balance payments, we look at two accounts, right? One is called the current account, one is called capital account. Okay? Capital account versus current account. What's current under current account? When we buy things from other countries, right? Or sell things from other countries. We buy services or sell services. Or when we have unilateral transfers. Like say, for example, we may have foreign workers working in this country. The person makes some money, and he is sending that to his home country. As Mexican workers here sending money back to Mexico. Right? In this case, he's not exporting anything or not importing anything, but it's just a one-way transfer of money. That's why it's called a unilateral transfer. Okay. So in a situation when you have a under current account, when you export goods, when you import goods, let's say you import something from Canada, from Europe, what's going to happen? It's going to cost you, right? You have to pay somebody something, a foreigner something, pay them money to get the imports in. So in other words, we use funds. There's uses of funds here, right? Money going out, goods coming in. Okay, services, same thing, right? Use funds. When you have unilateral transfer, the money is paid abroad. The money is sent back to Mexico, right? So it's also use of funds, right? But when we export our U.S. product, for example, what happens? Other countries pay us to buy our goods, right, or services, right? That becomes the source. They become the source of funds. So instead of using funds, we actually generate funds, source funds coming in. We export goods, export services, then we generate money. If, say, American citizen going abroad and make some money there and send money back, that's also from abroad, is also source of fund, right? So there is money coming in, right, due to export. There's money going out due to our imports, right? That's all. These are under current accounts. Under capital accounts, right, there is a short-term investment. You make some short-term investment by something like short-term, right? You made if you made some investment in another country, made abroad, you use money, right? You take money with you and go to other country to spend. Okay? If other countries invest in this country, then short-term investment, they're gonna bring money in, right? Somebody coming in, bring money in to invest in this country to build a factory. That's from abroad. Okay, long-term investment, same thing, right? Either made abroad or from abroad. Okay. Also, there's the official transaction account, the official reserve, the foreign exchange reserve changes when we import. Okay, when we import, okay, how big? There's foreign reserve changes take place, okay? And so the balance of payment is actually a net between our between our use of fund and source of fund. We normally take these two separately, and we look at the current account trade as one, right? So if we sell more than we import. We export more than we import. We're gonna have a trade, surplus. If we import more than we export, then we say we have a trade deficit. Okay? That's what trade deficit or trade surplus you heard about all the time in the news. Okay? Also about the foreign currencies. Let's say, for example, you made some money, you're selling something to Canada, to Europe, to Asia. You made money, and they gave you those foreign currencies. What do? Right? You want to exchange that to the U.S. dollars, so you can pay your bill, pay your people, right? So, what's the structure of foreign exchange, right? Basically, every country has a central bank. In this country, we have Federal Reserve Bank. I'm sure you know, right? And then Federal Reserve banks work with the brokers, large brokers of foreign exchange, foreign currencies. Okay? And then they work with the banks. I'm talking about major banks, big banks. Okay? And the banks then work with traders, people who get companies engaging in international trade, or they check, or there's inventory change, there's a tourist, and other customers. They work with those people to either buy the money or sell the money, right? That's what happens when you go to another country at an airport. You see those kiosks selling foreign currencies. You'll be part of that, tourist contribution to the foreign exchange market. Yeah? And the exchange rate is determined by supply and demand. Okay? Exchange rate is determined by supply and demand. Import and export affects exchange rate. Right? Import and export affect exchange rate. When you import more, when we import more than we export, let's think about this. Let's settle this for a second. Okay? We buy a lot of foreign goods and we export not as much, or import more. What's going to happen to our US dollars? What happens to US dollars? Is going to depreciate US dollars. Now, why is that? Why is that? Right? If we import a lot, let's say US and between US and Canada, right? We buy a lot from Canada, but we export not as much, but less from to Canada. What happens? Right? What happens? Right? We import, we buy the US Canadian goods, right? And we pay them with US dollars, right? And those Canadian exporters, what do they do with the US dollars? They're going to have to sell those dollars to get Canadian dollars, right? Since we are importing a lot, so they have lots of US dollars on hand and wanting to trade that, exchange that to Canadian dollars, so they can pay their Canadian workers, suppliers, make taxes, everything, right? So then there will be a oversupply of US dollars in the market between the exchanges between US dollar and Canadian dollars, right? When you have oversupply of US dollars, what happens to the exchange rate? The dollar will be cheaper, right? Dollar will depreciate. That's why you have imports, large imports, excessive imports will depreciate the US dollar, okay? Our own currency, right? On the other hand, if we export more, what happens? Okay? That I'm going to leave that to you to think through this exact same process that I just said, but it's on reverse, right? If we export more, export excessively, that's going to strengthen or make US dollar stronger for exact same reason. Right? A second factor affecting the exchange rate is inflation. If there's a huge inflation, right? If inflation is high, now we have a pretty high inflation nowadays, right? What's going to affect? How is that going to affect your exchange rate? It will make your money, it will make your currency cheaper. Because other countries, if they don't have that high inflation, our money is going to worth less. Okay. And also there are investors and speculators who may have impact. We have seen, like, for example, remember during Asian financial crisis, George Soros, he actually attacked Thai baht, right? And also he attacked, speculated on British pound as well. And then there's our government actions. government actions in like printing money or raise interest rate will also have impact on exchange rate. Okay? You probably heard about this question or this statement. Our dollar is strong or our dollar is weak. Do we want a strong dollar or we don't want a weak dollar? You heard about that, right? So is a strong currency good or bad? Or is a strong currency good, always good? Not necessarily, right? As business students, you need to know better, right? A strong currency means what? Depend on your importer or exporter. If your US dollar is strong or is more expensive, think about that. What can you do? You can buy more foreign goods cheaper, right? So a strong dollar is good for our import industries, for import sector. And but what about the export? If the dollar is strong, that make the foreigners less capable of buying U.S. product. So it's going to hurt our export. Okay, you see, a strong dollar, good for import, bad for export. A weak dollar, right, a not so strong dollar, right, weaker dollar is good for what? Good for export, but bad for import, right? I need to go through, read through this this part of chapter, think through these questions, right? Make sure you understand that, right? There will be questions in the test about this. Okay. Also, there are countries with the soft currency, we call soft currencies, and some countries with hard currencies. With soft currencies, the currencies of smaller, less developed countries, the rate can be determined by the government of these countries. The governments must eventually respect supply and demand, and currencies often face significant devaluations if they don't. Right? Soft currencies, most developing countries. Okay? Hard currency is what? US dollars, euros, Japanese yen, etc. And there is a dollarization in many countries, in some countries. Right? What's dollarization? Like what happened in Panama, right? Basically, Panama adopted the US dollar as its currency in 1904. Yeah, I once traveled to Panama, right, and spent a few days there. They just use US dollars, but yeah, you just spend your US dollar just as if as if you are in the United States, right? But they do have their own coins, right? They won't give you a change in US coin, but give their local coin. But bills, they don't print the bills. Okay, they use dollars. It's called dollarization. Ecuador adopted US dollars in 2000. Is a good idea or a bad idea for those countries? And good idea. The upside is they have monetary stability because they use dollars, right? The downside is the lack of flexibility in monetary or foreign exchange policy to respond to economic downturn or external shocks. Okay? So it's up to them. Okay? There are agencies promoting economic and monetary stability in our world. Right? I'm sure and you know and you understand. Remember these. Okay? It can be tested. You'll be tested for this. There is one called the International Monetary Fund, IMF. You probably heard about that. The purpose of the IMF or the mission is to prevent prevention of economic instability in the emerging markets. Right? There is also the World Bank. Right? World Bank, you cannot have open account with World Bank. They only loan to countries. It's for the long-term loans, long-term development of those developing countries, and long-term loans to build dams, bridges, highways, hospitals, etc. There is the group of seven or group of eight, used to be group of eight. There's finance ministers of central bank governors of US, Japan, Germany, France, Britain, Italy, and Canada. Used to have Russia, and now Russia was kicked out. Okay? There's also the G20. You heard about the G, not instead of G7, there's a G20 that included more countries in that, 20 countries in there. Okay? They are protectionism and the trade restrictions in our world today. Right? Countries use all kinds of ways to protect themselves, to restrict trade. Right? One thing is tariff. What is tariff? Tariff is tax on import and export. Right? Keep in mind one thing though. In this country, in the United States, the Constitution, our Constitution, forbids government to levy tariffs on exports. So you do not need to pay taxes on exports, okay? But you do need to pay taxes on imports, that's tariffs. Right? Quotas. What is quotas? The U.S. government would allow only a certain amount of a certain category of merchandise or goods from a certain country. That they set quotas for different countries. Right? There are also orderly marketing arrangements or voluntary export restrictions, put on themselves by the companies. Right? There are also non-tariff barriers. There's a non-tariff, but non-tariff barriers. Like for example, some country may say, hey, you have to have, to make a cars in this country, you have to have, say, 20% of components, parts from this country. You cannot import everything. So those kind of things are called, there are restrictions to trade. They're called non-tariff barriers. Okay. There was this general agreement on tariff on trade. That was an international organization, exists before, and it no longer exists now, but you need to know. It was formed in 1947 by 23 countries. Okay. These countries joining this GATT, G-A-T-T, GATT, they offer reciprocity and reduction or elimination of duties between members, no tariffs, right? And there's a non-discrimination clause, right? They give each other most favored nation or MFN status, right? It helped to simplify trade documentation, right? And then in 1996, the World Trade Organization, WTO, was formed and replaced GATT, GATT, okay? World Trade Organization. It was created as a final act of GATT, and it's based in Geneva with 153 member countries. It may be a little more nowadays. Members agreed to a set of rules to improve worldwide trade. World WTO is a forum to resolve trade disputes. If you have disputes with another country, you can go to WTO to settle your dispute. Okay? Unlike GATT, WTO decisions can only be overturned by consensus and not by veto. Okay? Nobody has a veto power. Okay? You can visit the website to learn more. Okay? There are opposition to WTO agendas. I'm sure you heard about that. Right? There's a Battle of Seattle in 1999. People don't like that, don't like WTO. And some say that it's unfair to developing countries. And some say it's a threat to national culture. So there are different opinions on that. Okay? Then there is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. You've probably heard about that. It's called TPP. Right? It started in 2015, and then started by countries like Singapore, Chile, and others, and the United States joined. But in 2017, President Trump withdrew from the TPP. And then TPP, without U.S., they formed what's called the CPTPP. Comprehensive and Progressive TPP in 2018. Now it's in 2023 now, so the U.S. still not a member of that, but it's going without the U.S. now. Okay? World Bank, right? World Bank, without the World Bank, right? It provides financial and technical assistance to developing countries. It was founded in 1944 in Washington, D.C. The main mission to fight poverty. Okay? Fight poverty. It provides low interest loans, no interest loans, and guarantees local government bonds. Right? And it contributes to global sustainability and care for the environment. That's their goal, the mission. Okay? There are different types of regional economic integration. the countries integrate themselves into different type of entities, organizations to promote economic development. And there, you need to know all these terms here: free trade area, custom union, common market, and complete economic integration. Okay, let's look at that, each one, every one of them. First, what's free trade area? Free trade area is two or more countries agree to eliminate trade barriers and tariffs between the countries. So we form a free trade area, no tariffs, yeah, no barriers. Okay, and countries continue to have individual agreements with other countries. Okay, there's one called the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, if you remember. That's between U.S., Mexico, and the U.S. North American Free Trade, NAFTA. Okay, but NAFTA is now gone. Okay, it's replaced by USMCA. Okay, that's thanks to the help, the effort of President Trump. Okay, now we have USMC, and NAFTA it's no longer there. Okay, and that's a free trade area, right? The next one is a custom union. That's a trade agreement between two or more countries, elimination of internal barriers and tariffs, establish a common and external barriers and tariff to other countries. Basically, say we form a union, we don't have trade tariffs within our union, within the countries, between countries within the union, but we charge some others outside the union tariffs. That's what custom union is about. Right? Mercosur is one. It also referred to as the Southern Common Market. Include the Latin American countries of Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay. Okay, that's a custom union. Okay? Then there's a common market. Some countries develop further into common market. That's basically elimination of internal barriers and tariffs between two or more countries, and establishment of common external barriers to trade. Right? There's a free movement of the factors, not just the goods, but the factor of production, labor, capital, and information, all free flowing. Yeah. European Union is such a common market. Yeah. In Europe and in EU countries, they have the same currency. You can go to, maybe you're a French worker, right? You can go to Germany to work, and then come home at night, back to France. Okay? European Union is a common market. Okay? EU or European Union, their objectives are to promote economic and social progress, assert the identity of the European Union on the international scene, introduce European citizenship, and develop an area of freedom, right? Maintain and build and establish EU law. You've probably heard that, right? How did it start? In 1951, the European Coal and Steel Community was first established. And in 1957, Treaties of Rome started. It forms the European Economic Community, or later on, it's called European Community. Yeah. And then 1960, European Free Trade Association was established, Free Trade Association. Then in 1967, internal tariffs eliminated in European countries. Yeah. Common external tariffs imposed. Yeah. In 1992, they signed the Maastricht Treaty and formed the European Union. Okay? In 1999, most countries in the European Union adopted the Eurozone. Countries joining Eurozone, right? And in 2009, in the Lisbon Treaty signed. Right? And then in 2017, UK, joined. But in 2020, United Kingdom withdrew from the EU. So that we have seen. Okay?